panting your way to mediocrity with Edexcel IGCSE English Language, Paper 1, Question 6 and 7. Let me get you higher grades, looking first at how to write magazine articles and to nail the tone. So stay tuned. This is Schofield on Shakespeare.
The mark scheme is looking for the right tone, perceptive and subtle communication, extensive strategic vocabulary, and accuracy. So, what are the features of magazine articles? Well, pop a quick headline at the top of your response, but don't spend ages thinking about it. You won't have time. Naff is fine. Whereas in a formal letter, you will explain why you are writing in the very first sentence. In a magazine article, you might like to set the scene briefly first or explain the background before introducing the main idea. Keep paragraphs short within a magazine article. Within my model response, I actually use 18, but most of them are just 1 to 4 sentences long. A magazine article is more likely to give a personal perspective than a newspaper article, which will be slightly more formal. Go into plenty of detail and explain your initial idea further. Keep aiming to engage your reader, to keep them reading. You can do this by using single sentence paragraphs for effect, to emphasize a dramatic moment, or building up more slowly to something important. Here's the exam style question. A magazine is inviting readers to send in an article about the people, places, or things that they will never forget. Write the article that you would submit to the magazine. Time to do this yourself. Off you go. Press pause now. Hopefully you've produced a cracker. However, you might be interested in seeing the first sentence of every paragraph within my model answer. Consider and discuss how the tone is created, and think about how the initial idea might be developed in the rest of each paragraph. Go on then, press pause now. Now let's look at the model response as a whole. Fine fellows fondly missed. Unforgettable memories, the fondest of recollections. Regular readers of Woman's Own will have encountered many such articles, typically about loved ones passing away. For instance, the November 2024 edition featured Norbert Jenkinson's bittersweet recollections of his recently deceased wife, Heather née Gilmore, whilst the March 2024 edition included a double-page spread on a Cocker Spaniel known as Jim Bone, who had faithfully served his human masters and performed life-saving heroics for 12 years. My own personal tribute is of a different nature. Many will view it as unconventional and, to say the least, in poor taste. However, 32 years after their passing, I would like to pay tribute to my collection of cooked sausages. May they be resting in peace. Many Woman's Own readers will empathise with the dilemma that I found myself in one wintry morning in late 1990 in my primary school. Lunch was a crowd favourite, bangers and mash, and one pupil in particular was known to have a penchant for the former. Me. Portions were surprisingly large in primary schools during this period, and the teachers frowned upon any kind of food wastage. Thus, the pupils set up an intricate system in which various food items were redistributed furtively beneath the table. If I recall correctly, Kate Atkinson was the recipient of surplus to requirement lashes of bacon. Farty Freeman received extra Brussels sprouts, whilst I was given the sausages. Except this morning, they kept on coming. Now, I can scoff sausages with the best of them. In my prime, age 11 3/4, I could put away 6 or 7 sausages without any difficulties at all. However, on this particular morning, the numbers were in double figures, and I had to save face. Thus, with the rest of the dining hall distracted elsewhere, I popped 3 of the little meaty blighters into my pocket, reputation safely salvaged. But then I had a delicious idea. Why shouldn't I keep hold of these sausages and store them somewhere as part of a collection? Although I was no scientist, I was interested in seeing what would happen to them over time, seeing them grow, if you like. Thus, Percy, Gordon, and Dean were born, safely wrapped in toilet paper within a large plastic tube, which I stored in a loft above some temporary backyard toilet facilities. 1 week in, I duly clambered up into the loft and inspected the collection. Little change so far, although a number of small hairs could be discerned on 3 of the lads. Now, discretion has never been a part of my makeup, and it wasn't long before the rest of the year knew about my collection. Being young teenagers, it goes without saying that they were supportive and enthusiastic. Within weeks, Henry, Humphrey, and Marmaduke had joined the collection. For some reason, I only gave the sausages male names. Marmaduke is worth a particular mention here. Whereas his peers were predominantly made of pork and fat and rusk and gristle, Marma's was a Frankfurter and thus had considerably less meat content. When he first entered the collection, his length was a resplendent 12 inches, considerably longer than his peers. However, a week later, an extraordinary transformation had taken place. Marmaduke's length was now a mere few inches. Years later, I understand that this is something to do with the water content within a Frankfurter, but at the time I was genuinely incredulous. Our group spent hours speculating about its cause. But all good things have to come to an end. Within my final week at the school, the headmaster took me to one side. Rumours had reached the school management that I was planning to bequeath my collection to a fortunate pupil in the year below. This was indeed the case, and both Alex Henderson and Jocelyn Good were in pole position to take on the duties, having launched aggressive charm offensives in the preceding months. Christian, they need to go. So one evening, the tube containing Percy, Henry, Humphrey et al. Was unceremoniously slung into an industrial-sized refuse container. Gone, but never forgotten, even 32 years on. Before we dissect this model response, a delightful interlude. Can you spot the glaring spelling errors within these 3 sentences on the screen? Press pause to get thinking. I've been a wally by mixing up empathize, E-M-P-A-T-H-I-S-E, and emphasize, E-M-P-H-A-S-I-S-E. OMG, I wasn't being 50% and doing rapping, although past pupils may recall fondly my rap about a hat. If we're talking about enclosing something, such as a birthday present or a cooked sausage, the rap needs to start with a W. This really is a terrible error. M-E-E-T is about going to see someone. M-E-A-T is about delicious food from an animal. Whoopsie. So why does this get full marks? Well, to start with, I use a headline. Why? Well, because magazine articles use and need headlines. Given that I'm going to reference something which most people will think is ridiculous and made up, I first need to create the right, realistic, reasonably formal tone for my article as a whole. I do this by name-checking typically tedious-sounding articles from previous editions. Notice the pun poor gag here. With the benefit of hindsight, how could anyone disagree that keeping rotten sausages isn't in poor taste? Note also the use of anecdotes and the lively tone. I set the scene by referencing a wintry morning in late 1990 in my primary school. Meanwhile, a lively tone is created through phrases such as lunch was a crowd favourite and the fact that one pupil had a penchant for sausages. Regular viewers of my channel will know that I love a good single sentence paragraph for effect. Is there an argument that magazine articles should have even more of these to help maintain the interest of a readership brought up almost exclusively on scandal and gossip? Although I don't expect the vast majority of readers to get the overall idea, which is that keeping rotting sausages might be interesting and believable for a child, I do expect them to empathise with a child's desire to save face. Thus, I draw attention to this within another single sentence paragraph for effect. A few additional things to note here. Note the cynical inverted commas around temporary backyard toilet facilities. All of us are aware that such porta cabins within UK state schools can in fact be around for a very long time. Note also the affectionate tone towards the sausages at the end of the paragraph, 3 of the lads. This kind of more informal language is appropriate in a magazine article, but not in a newspaper article or a formal letter. You need to connect with your readership within a magazine article. I do this here with my confessional tone. Note also the understated way I reference the reaction of other primary school children. They were supportive and enthusiastic. This helps maintain my perspective as the older, wiser narrator looking ironically back on his past. You will probably have realised by now that, unlike my previous non-fiction model responses, this piece of writing is in the main factually correct. I did have a frankfurter called Marmaduke, and by gum, did he shrink. Notice the comic use of the verb bequeath here, normally used for something important and grand, here in relation to rotting sausages. Keep using facts and names within these articles, letters, speeches, etc. Within this section, I give the full names of 2 particularly keen pupils in the year below, Alex Henderson and Jocelyn Goods. There needs to be a sense of finality at the end of these pieces. I achieve this here by using 2 consecutive, grammatically incomplete sentences for dramatic effects. I'm also careful not to overdo my narrative and thus avoid any ridiculous references to extended periods of mourning, etc.
This has been a Schofield on Shakespeare production. Many thanks for watching.